Nieves.
Here.
Vice Chairman Shaw.
Here.
Senators Lively,
Here.
Romine,
Here.
Sylvie,
Here.
Bozeman, Nasheed.
Here.
All right, we have quorum, so we will officially get started. We have, for those of you that don't know, it's pretty common at this time of year for the plans to change and be very liquid, so we found out that there is a 3:30 meeting that many of our members need to get to, so we are going to handle this very quickly. And I just need to start out as it pertains to Senate Bill 865. How many people, whether it's for, against, or for informational purposes only, how many people intend to testify today? If you would raise your hand if you plan to testify. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so about 9 or 10 people are needing to testify, and we need to get this done in 30 minutes. And so what I'm going to request from each person desiring to testify is that, and maybe, I don't know what kind of coordination you all may have, if there's a coordinated effort on the part of those who are for and a coordinated effort on the part of those who are against, but you might want to start with your best leadoff batter, because the first person to testify on either side is going to be given about 3 minutes, and then everyone thereafter is going to be given about 2. And so it will be timed. I'm going to introduce the bill and then come right back up here so that I can be the bad guy. And we
You
won't
don't trust me to be the bad guy?
I trust you very much to be the bad guy. I just know you have a long and prosperous career in this building, and I may not. So anyway, so if y'all need to quietly talk about who's going to go first, you're welcome to do that. If you just keep it to a light roar as I come up and introduce the bill in just a minute, and then we'll open it up for testimony. Does everybody understand that? And then the other thing that we always talk about is you're getting used to this, aren't you?
Yes.
She's become quite a celebrity because she was the first person smart enough to figure out how to bring recording equipment into this committee room that was suitable to the chair. And so, is there anyone besides, I'm sorry, tell me your name again. I've
Grace.
20 times.
Grace.
Grace. Is there anyone
Yes.
besides Grace that will be videotaping the proceedings? You're welcome to audio record all you want, but if you're going to videotape, we do need you to fill out a little form that I'm sure Grace has already filled out, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right, very good. Well, I will turn this over very quickly and temporarily to our Vice Chairman, Senator Shaw. And then come back.
Okay, we'll open up the committee hearing on Senate Bill 865, Senator Nieves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Senator Brian Nieves from the 26th Senatorial District. I am going to very briefly introduce you to Senate Bill 865. I'm going to be very brief because we have quite a few people that some of whom have traveled from great distance to testify on this, and I think they can probably do a much better job than I. This bill simply prohibits, it allows cities and towns to prohibit dogs from running at large, provided that the regulation is not specific to any particular breed of dog. It's been amazing to me, Mr. Chairman, ever since filing this bill. I thought this would be just a simple little bill, but I've gotten a ton of email on this bill. And I will say, and certainly everyone would suspect me of being biased anyway since it is my bill, but the number of proponents have greatly outnumbered the number of opponents. In fact, I'm not certain that I have received any email in opposition. I have had a couple of personal face-to-face conversations with folks, but no emails. I've just gotten a lot of email, a lot of information from people that just really believe that it would be wrong to single out any particular breed or any particular type of dog. They have rules about that dog that wouldn't be the same as any other. So that's the crux of the bill, and like I said, we do have quite a few expert or semi-expert witnesses that want to testify, so I'm going to move back to that chair very quickly unless anybody has any questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
A question
Senator
for
Van
Pamela
Ishii.
Bill. So this would be your legacy, a dog bill.
Everybody's got to have a swan song.
I hope Jones do something a little different when he get in.
There's probably a lot of
Okay,
people.
further question? Seeing none, Would whoever wants to lead off the testimony in favor of Senate Bill 865 please come forward? Just tell the committee who you are, and be sure to fill out a witness form.
Of course. Thank you. My name is Libby Van Cabbage. I am an attorney with Best Friends Animal Society. I'm the past chair of the American Bar Association's Animal Law Committee, and I'm also an instructor for the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards. And basically, we think Senate Bill 865 is a wonderful bill because it protects property rights, it enhances public safety, and it also saves tax dollars. Basically, in Missouri, any city can decide any policies or any ordinances specific as to breed. In fact, there are some cities in Missouri that outlaw chows, they outlaw Rottweilers, Dobermans, Pit Bull Terriers, a variety of breeds of dogs. So this prevents citizens from moving from one city to another, or if they do, they have to give up their pet. I think you were handed out an article about Joplin, the tornado. A man basically was able to go back to his house. His house had been flattened. He was able to dig his 2 dogs out of the tornado debris. And one was a Rottweiler, one was a Pit Bull Terrier. He bought a house that in Carl Junction, Missouri. And when he moved there, after the papers were signed, he found out he could not have his Pit Bull Terrier. So basically, he loved his pet, but he had to give it up because he had bought a house where it wasn't allowed. And this dog had never done anything wrong. So there are 17 states that have similar legislation that protect property rights of pet owners against local government infringement. And we would ask that the committee support this bill. The American Bar Association also has passed a resolution asking for all cities to repeal 3 discriminatory ordinances and policies.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you for staying within 3 minutes. Do we have questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your time. And please leave a witness form if you've not already filled one of those out. And now the lead batter for those who would be, we're going to just bounce back and forth in case we run out of time. And I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. But we will just go back and forth in case we run out of time. So if we could have the lead opponent, you will have 3 minutes as well. Please introduce yourself to the committee, fill out a witness form, and proceed.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Bob Baker. I'm the Executive Director of the Missouri Alliance for Animal Legislation. And we're opposed to this bill. This bill will take away municipalities and local governments' authority to protect these animals from abuse. This bill is being sold as this is to protect pit bulls. In fact, it doesn't. It endangers them. Pit bulls are, without a doubt, the most abused dogs in this state. In St. Louis alone, where I live, almost a week doesn't go by when there's not a pit bull being set on fire, hanged, dragged behind a car. This last week, a viral video of a pit bull being abused in St. Louis went national of a teenager slamming this pit bull to the ground, beating it with his fist. These dogs attract the worst owners. Pit bulls only make up about 6% of the total dog population, and yet our shelters in the state are full of pit bulls. Many of these shelters have more than 50% of their dogs are pit bulls. We have to do something to address these dogs from being abandoned, neglected, run loose on our streets, and being abused. Many of these ordinances that are going to be taken away are there to protect these dogs. This won't even allow policy on how to house this dog in an animal shelter differently than any other breed, and yet they might be more difficult to house. It takes away, many shelters are very scrupulous in screening adoption to make sure these dogs don't fall into the wrong hands. And this would do away with that. Many of our municipalities don't have the money to do the general screening that's required of every dog that comes in their control. About 40% of our municipal shelters right now don't have the money to comply with our state law because of lack of funding and resources. This is going to put an extra burden on them. But more importantly, we're just going to be perpetuating the breeding of these dogs. The concern seems to be that these pit bulls are being discriminated against. In fact, they're protected. What's going to happen when this passes, you're going to have 30 communities or so in the state that will now have to allow pit bulls in. It's going to increase the breeding of these dogs, and there's going to be more pit bulls euthanized. We euthanize 900,000 pit bulls in this country every year. We have to do something to address this. The most effective method of doing this to protect the ownership and property rights and also the dogs is to have mandatory spay and neuter. San Francisco was the first city to adopt this. The number of pit bulls impounded dropped 50%. The number of fatal dog attacks went down 81%. not just fatal, but significant attacks, and the pit bulls being euthanized decreased. Kansas City adopted that, and they've seen something like a 35% reduction in impoundment of dogs in the Kansas City area. This would do away with that. This is only going to perpetuate dog suffering. It's going to perpetuate people being attacked. 78% of the people killed last year by dog bites were killed by pit bulls. Remember, they only make up 6% of the dog population, and these are the dogs that are victimizing people. There's peer-reviewed studies in medical journals that talk about the amount of damage that these dogs are doing to the public welfare. This isn't good for the public, it's not good for the dogs. I mean, the simple problem is, you know, I know you have a pit bull, and if we had more people like you who adopted pit bulls, we wouldn't have this problem. But there's no way you can adopt your way out of this problem. You have to come up, have effective means of really going after the cause. Just adopting dogs out is just treating the symptoms.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. And I think Representative Nasheed would agree that if more people were like me, we'd have a lot less problems in general. So I do appreciate that. I do have a couple of questions for you. And you and I have typically worked together on these kinds of issues, and so these questions are friendly. First of all, when we talk about you know, the housing of these animals, if we allow for breed-specific rules, I wonder if that is better than just having a policy that might say any dog that weighs over X number of pounds, you know, will be observed for such and such period of time. In other words, have a policy that would protect the pit bulls or any other power breed that we might talk about. But in other words, under this legislation, it would be my belief that any of these entities could continue to have policies that say any dog that's over X number of pounds will be treated this way for the first 48 hours that they're here while they're being observed. They just wouldn't be able to say any pit bull.
Well, the problem is that you're then avoiding a golden retriever with a pit bull. I mean, there are certain power breeds that are usually most shelters classify them as Dobermans, Rottweilers, pit bulls, things like that. So it's more than just the size, it's the temperament and what they prefer for and the aggression. You know, right now we don't even have any laws in this book for lack of control of dogs. You know, the opponents keep talking about this is for public safety. The fact is, last year we took the word control out of our cruelty statutes, so there's no criminal penalties in this state for intentionally allowing your dogs to run loose, harass, and intimidate people. Our dog bite statutes require a second attack before action can be taken. You know, and I asked when I met with you if we could amend this to put control back in so we have some laws to protect the public if we're going to allow these pit bulls to propagate in the state. We need some protection to have, you know, a consequence.
I'm still open to that. Yeah. I mean, this is, you know, we're pretty open as we go through this process. So then my next question would be, I'm not going to belabor the story of my pit bull. You've already heard the story of that. But the facility that had what is now my dog had a policy that if they picked up a dog that was part pit, in any, you know, a quarter pit, half pit, if it was part pit, it could only be adopted by the owner that was reclaiming it. It was not adoptable by anybody other than the person who came in and claimed to be the owner. And that if the owner didn't come and pick up the dog would be euthanized. And so, you know, I think those of us who are in favor of Senate Bill 865 want to try to navigate a way to, you know, keep those types of policies from being in place. And I would just invite you to continue to give me feedback as we go through the process of finishing this up to see if maybe there's a way that we can do that.
Absolutely, and I think it's just allowing for mandatory spay-neuter. You know, it keeps dead ownership intact for your property rights, but it yet protects the public. Because the reason why they're limiting these pit bulls and don't want them adopted out of the owner, like you said, 6% of these dogs are pit bulls, and they're creating half our problems. And these are the animals that are being abused, these are the animals that shelters have to keep euthanizing over and over again. And there are effective methods to address this problem. If this bill goes too far, we're taking away those methods.
Other questions? Senator Shaw.
So right now, a municipality can say, you may not own a pit bull,
That's correct.
and you want it to stay that way.
it would be better than doing away with everything. This bill throws out everything. It says you can't have any ordinances, regulations, policies. So in other words, some shelters are more aggressive in screening out. If someone comes in to adopt a pit bull, they know that by experience, they attract the wrong owners. Gangbangers, everybody, dog fighters, people who just want a dog to be macho, they're not the most responsible pet owners. That's why these pit bulls are creating quite a problem.
So you want them to be able to limit pit bulls in some ways, but not other ways?
I think it's that they need to have the flexibility to address the problems in their own communities that they're dealing with in pit bulls. Less than a year ago, I met a judge from St. Joseph, and I complimented him. I said, your animal control agency in St. Joseph said that you've always been so fair with them whenever they bring dog cases before you. And his response was, tell me this, why is every case of abuse, neglect, dog running as large as a pit bull? And this is what we're trying to address. We want communities to be able to address that. If saying we can't have them at all is their only solution, I think there's other alternatives. And this bill takes away everything. It says you can't screen them to make sure that...
So it would be okay if we said you can do everything except say that you can't have them?
Absolutely. We
Thank you.
Other questions for the witness? Seeing none, please make sure that you leave a witness form, and let's have the next person in favor of Senate Bill 865. The next person to speak in favor. Please state your name for the record and be sure to leave a witness form. You can vote, I'm sorry, any of the chairs are fine.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Courtney Thomas, and I'm the president of Great Plains SPCA. Just for clarity, our organization is in no way affiliated with national organizations like the ASPCA or the Humane Society of the United States, but instead represents one of the largest animal welfare shelters in our region with 5 state campuses in Missouri and in Kansas. In 2013, our organization served over 30,000 pets and their human companions. We care deeply about the laws that are governing animals in our state, and we're impacted greatly by the success or failure of such laws. What you have before you today in Senate Bill 865 is the opportunity to make history in our state. Not long ago in 2009, great change came to Missouri with the launch of Operation Bark Alert. Since this time, standards continue to elevate as the Department of Agriculture focuses on more rescues, more prosecutions, and advanced enforcement. Let's not stop now. Ordinances and animal welfare laws are intended to protect the health and welfare of the public and the animals. There is, however, no evidence that supports BSL or proves that such laws make communities safer for pets and people. In fact, such laws mislead the community into a false sense of security. Countless studies have proven the ineffectiveness of breed-specific legislation. It's a waste of time, taxpayers' dollars, and human resources. Presently, there are 17 other states that support the legislation before you today. Along with Missouri, there are also 4 other states who are considering similar legislation to prohibit BSL. When we label dogs as dangerous simply based on their breed makeup and appearance, we deflect where the attention needs to be, which is addressing dangerous dogs regardless of the breed. There are no studies that prove that pit bulls are dangerous. There are, however, countless studies that prove the conditions in which animals live, the way they are treated by their owners, and the medical care they receive does drive and predict behavior. The Centers for Disease Control, the National Animal Control Association, the American Bar Association, and the American Veterinary Medical Association, along with many other professional agencies, do not support BSL. Why are we debating a subject that the experts have already solved? What we owe our community and...
You're coming up on your 2 minutes, so.
Okay, all right. I will just address a couple of the statements that were just made in the previous testimony to say that the mandatory spay-neuter has not been effective in our community. We serve the Kansas City Metro as well as Independence, Missouri, and our shelters are full of pit bull type breeds because of BSL. Mandatory spay-neuter is not protecting the breed. In fact, we're seeing higher rates of euthanasia for this breed in particular when euthanasia in our community is going down as a whole.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have to stay under some tight confines today.
Absolutely.
Do we have questions for this witness? All right, thank you. And did you leave a witness?
I've already, thank you.
Next person to speak against. Please introduce yourself to the committee and be sure to leave a witness form.
Bill Gamble, City of Kansas City. I've already left my witness form at the desk there. We do have an ordinance that requires a mandatory spaying and neutering of pit bulls. This breed of animal is most involved in dog fighting, is most bites, and the one that's we've found most frequently in our shelters. So our ordinance doesn't ban breed specific, but our ordinance does require a mandatory spaying and neutering of this breed. And we think it's an effective step. There is some disagreement with that, certainly respect the disagreement, but our animal control department believes that this is a step in the right direction, and it's not a radical step. It is something that we think works, and it doesn't go to the extent of banning a breed, which we have not done.
Very good. And I did have one question for you.
Sure.
What you currently have in place, does it specifically say pit bulls, and is it exclusively pit bulls?
Yes, it is. It is exclusive to pit bulls. It's my understanding it is exclusive to pit bulls, and it just deals with spaying and neutering. So yes, it is breed specific.
Okay, so truly no pun intended, but we're not going to be dogmatic about how we do this.
I understand.
I mean, we do want to find some. I wish
I understand.
there was a different word I could have used there.
Yeah, no, it was very appropriate.
You know, I'm not sure if you had seen one of the things that was going around the Capitol. I'm not even sure if I remember who showed it to me, but I know it was on the part of the proponents of this bill, where it had maybe 20 or 25 pictures of dogs, and it said, please pick out the pit bulls.
I understand.
And it was, I mean, I tried to pick out the pit bulls, and I couldn't pick out the pit bulls, and there was one that looked like a dang poodle.
I understand.
That was a pit bull. And so this is gonna be a weird thing to navigate, and so
Yes. I respect that. We found a pit bull on our front yard. We found a home for it, and at first, we didn't know what it was either. So I understand exactly where you're coming from. We're very fortunate to find a home for it with someone who trained our golden retriever. So certainly understand that point, and it's gonna be tough. I can only tell you, like my old English grandmother said, I'm delivering the message, and facts are stubborn things, and these are the facts that we have found ourselves dealing with in the city of Kansas City. And instead of going to extremes, we're going in this narrow direction.
very good. Do we have questions for this witness? Seeing none, thanks for your testimony. Do we have someone to speak in favor that might particularly bring up property rights? Is there someone prepared to speak on that? If we could have you as the next person to speak for, and please remember, and I apologize for this, it's beyond my control, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry, introduce yourself. There's a little green light on there that'll come on if it's...
Looks like that.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you, sir. My name is Russ Crone. I live in Blue Springs, Missouri. I'm a board member and registered lobbyist for the Missouri Federation of Animal Owners. I've been a member since inception for 20 years. I am a registered lobbyist. Most of my lobbying for MOFED has been at the local level. I'm also board member of the Endangered Breeds Association, a national group that was started to preserve the American Pit Bull Terrier group, provide education for the public, and do things for people that are law-abiding citizens that have been affected by PSL. I'd like to thank the senator and the chairman for sponsoring this bill. Regarding property rights, I think that when people move to a community, they have a reasonable expectation of what criminal activity would be. I do not feel that it's reasonable, that it is unreasonable to expect that they move in with their family pet and it's either regulated or illegal. I do believe that animal control is basically a local issue. However, sometimes it is justified and appropriate that the state exert some control over that. For instance, the state places a cap on municipal violations for a good reason. But it is property rights, much like firearms, similar issues. It is a personal property issue. Most people in their community do not want breed-specific legislation. They're perfectly happy if animal control shows up when they're called. They don't want dogs running at large, going to the bathroom in the yard, or incessant barking. Having been an American Pit Bull Terrier owner for over 30 years, very familiar with the breed, have many titles, and believe me, if my city passed PSL, I would be gone. As long as I'm breathing, my city's not going to.
All right, well, thank you for your testimony. I did, you know, I mentioned that I had received a lot of emails on this subject, and one of the reoccurring themes was, and that's why I wanted someone who was going to speak on property rights, one of the reoccurring themes that I've heard in these emails is just people bringing up the issue of property rights. And so, and I'm sorry, you are with what organization?
Well, both MoFed and the Endangered Breeds Association.
So MoFed, I think, typically works in the area of property rights and animal owners' rights and things like that. So, you know, one of the things that was mentioned in several of these emails is, okay, if we're going to do breed specific today on pit bulls, what are we going to go after next?
Well, several years ago, there were over 75 breeds across the country that had been banned. So it's not just a pit bull issue.
Okay, very good. Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thanks for your testimony.
Thank you, sir.
Please leave the witness form. And now the next person who would speak against. And again, I apologize. We're working against forces that are beyond my control. If you would keep your testimony to 2 minutes.
Okay. My name is Alan Jones, in St. Louis, Missouri. Been in the pet business for 40 years. Own and operate boarding kennels, training facilities, day camp centers. I'm going to leave a study from the Level 1 Trauma Center, San Antonio University Hospital, a dog bite study over a 15-year period. I'll just go over the highlights, but I'll leave the entire report for you. In treating 228 patients, they had 82 patients that could identify the breed, 29 were pit bulls. Compared with attacks by other breeds of dogs, attacks by pit bulls were associated with a higher injury severity scale score, a higher risk of admission Glasgow-Coma scale, and that is simply identifying the neurological damage done already. Higher median hospital charges and higher risk of death. Conclusions: attacks by pit bulls are associated with higher morbidity rates, higher hospital charges, higher risk of death, and attacks by other breeds. Strict regulation of the pit bulls may substantially reduce the U.S. mortality rates related to dog bites. 2 more points. If the risk of a fatal attack is normalized to Labrador Retriever, which is the most commonly registered breed in the United States, the death rate related to pit bull attacks is 25 times higher. Pit bull is a different breed of dog. It's much stronger than other dogs, and when it begins an attack, it finishes an attack. The authors conclude that while fatal dog attacks are rare, there appears a distinct relationship between the severity and lethal of an attack by this breed of dog. The actuarial risk associated with certain breeds of dogs, specifically pit bulls, is unacceptable. The study adds that municipalities must be able to enact ordinances to protect citizens from the risk, and to do so, local, county, and state legislative bodies must address this issue.
All right, thank you for your testimony. Do we have questions for this witness? Seeing none, please be sure to leave a witness form. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, is there anyone here that would like to speak for informational purposes only? Anyone who's for informational purposes? Please come forward. And you have about 1 minute.
That's quite all right, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't really going to speak because I didn't know you were going to allow information. My wife has trained dogs for the last 25 plus years. We've dealt with a lot of people. We're not involved in any organization, get no money from what we're doing. And my wife has taken in various dogs with behavioral problems to deal with them. Sometimes it's taken them years to untrain bad things that have been trained into those dogs. The reality is you can take any breed of any kind and you can train that dog either accidentally or on purpose to be the meanest dog in the neighborhood. And this happens to a lot of dogs. People don't know necessarily how to handle their dogs. But also, I know from personal experience, that back in the 60s, if you had a bad dog in the neighborhood, everybody called it a German Shepherd. In the 70s and 80s, if you had a bad dog in the neighborhood, everybody called it a Doberman. in the 90s and now into the 2000s, every time somebody's talking about a bad dog, doggone it, it's a pit bull. People don't know what they're talking about. And that's one of the big problems with breed-specific legislation at the local level, is everybody wants to call the dog what's been demonized. Thank you very much.
Questions for this witness? All right, thank you. And then how many